So this report is from Vice News. It was made by Tess Owen on May 29th, 2020 at 2:41 p.m. Far-right extremists are hoping to turn the George Floyd protests into a new civil war. Armed extremists are showing up to the protests and urging a boogaloo, a code for civil war online. Far-right extremists are showing up with guns to protest against police brutality that have exploded across the country. Others are egging on the violence from behind their computers, urging followers to carry out acts of violence against black protesters with the goal of sparking a race war. The presence makes an uneasy addition to the escalating unrest, which was triggered by the death of George Floyd, a black man who was choked to death by a white Minneapolis police officer earlier this week. But there's a range of motivations that's driving far-right interest towards the protests, which are being led by community members in Black Lives Matter and bolstered by anti-fascists. For example, the so-called Boogaloo Boys, a group of armed anti-government extremists made visible by their Hawaiian shirts, have reportedly shown up to some of the protests. The Boogaloo is code for impending civil war or violent confrontation with law enforcement. That's what they're hoping to get out of the protests. Their main reason for being there is their antipathy toward law enforcement, and so they're trying to position themselves as allies of Black Lives Matter protesters. They've made police brutality one of their central issues, which was explored at length in a Bellingcat article this week. Their approach to police brutality links the victims of the deadly standoff with federal agents at Ruby Ridge in 1992 to the victims of modern police brutality, including Floyd. But unlike the vast majority of protesters, they refuse to acknowledge the fact that police brutality is an issue that disproportionately impacts people of color. There have been scattered reports of Boogaloo Boys' presence at the protests, which were compiled by Bellingcat investigative journalists in a thread. He includes an audio clip stripped of video per activist requests of protesters saying that they'd wrestled a handgun from a white nationalist agitator, whom he describes as a Boogaloo Boy who became over rowdy. Another photo shared across private Boogaloo Facebook pages showed one of their own unfurling their trademark flag during the Minneapolis protests. And one protester posted a picture of himself wearing a gas mask to Instagram under the hashtag Boogaloo. While some Boogaloo Boys say they're just libertarians, others will, on occasion, veer into racism. Make no secret of their desire for violence. In addition to their physical presence at protests, Boogaloo hashtag on social media has been flooded with memes in the last couple of days, egging on violence and talking about how they hope this is the beginning of a civil war. While most established militia types sometimes share those perspectives, they often view themselves as intermediaries between law enforcement and civilians. For example, two armed white men were interviewed by the Minnesota Reformer, a local independent news organization outside a tobacco store in Minneapolis this week. They said that they were reporting business from looters, or they were protecting businesses from looters, but they were also there to defend civilians should they need to. Cops are less likely to tread on people's rights when there's other armed people around, one of the men told the interviewer. Local activists identified another group in Minneapolis as members of the 3% militia, one of the largest militia networks in the U.S. But perhaps the most troubling of all are the hardcore accelerationists who are encouraging their neo-Nazi followers to go to the protests and carry out acts of violence against black people. All with the goal of exacerbating the ethnic tensions and sparking a race war. Accelerationists promote violence to speed up the collapse of society. An eco-fascist Telegram channel wrote to its nearly 2,500 subscribers on Thursday that a riot would be the perfect place to commit a murder. Accelerationists often seek to exploit moments of political or civil unrest, with the widespread protests that have unfolded across the country fit the bill. Similarly, 4chan is full of racists sharing the violence and saying that they hope it's the beginning of a race war. So, folks, I hope that you are paying attention to what's going on and seeing behind the surface level of things. Do you notice some of the people that are suddenly on your side never were? And it's kind of odd that they would express such opinions. I have. Don't let the disinformation and don't let the intents of people who actively use lies to manipulate you. Recognize them. You got to learn to recognize them. You can't be naive. Why are white people in red states telling colored people in blue cities to burn their areas to the ground?